All right, Michael Lee, thanks for coming to the show, man. Really appreciate it. You just kicked off 2021 with a bang.
A little bit.
So, what was the name of this virtual 200?
So the event is actually taken off after another event locally called Jam on Tam.
Okay.
I added an extra spin to it and decided to set the limit upper limit to about 200 miles. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So, what's the normal event distance? Is it just kind of go as far as you want, or how does it work?
So the event actually started off in 2019 by a local running company called Pacific Coast Trail Runs.
Okay.
And so the goal is there's a local mountain called Mount Tamalpais, and the peak is at 2,572 feet.
Hmm.
So there's a route, start of a segment called Mount Tam Hill Climb, which is 3.29 miles from the base to the door. The door meaning there's actually a fire lookout tower at the top, and you have to tap the door. That's basically
Okay.
from the clock to the door. You tap the door. That's the segment. So the original contest 2 years ago was to do the fastest or the mostest. In
Okay.
other words, in one from one ascent, the fastest time to get through 3.29 miles, or within a 11-day period, the most number of ascent.
Okay.
So back in 2019, I actually proposed to the RD. I said, well, what about mostest in one day? So he said, sure, if you want to, how many do you think you can do? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to go give it a shot. So I bagged about eight ascent in 24-hour period, and that locked about 60 miles and just over 20,000 feet
Okay.
of
Okay.
so the story goes with the pandemic, we actually had that event in 2020. I was actually the race director for that event
Oh,
because it's
okay.
actually a virtual event, right? So this is in January 2020 before all the pandemic started. So folks were just go bang away, and I actually bowed out of that 2020 event because since it's kind of weird to participate in your own event. So
Gotcha.
I basically organized it and help facilitate it and cheer people up and down the hills, and was out there a lot taking photos during the weekend. And then at the end of the year in December 2020, a good friend of mine, Kati Land, decided to. She lives in Mill Valley, like 5 minutes from the start. So she decided to go bang up and down that mountain for 105 miles. And so that set the new record for that particular course. So and I kind of go, well, that's great, and that was hard too. I mean, I knowing that hill, and it's the same track going up, so there's some middle mile of it is some very technical, and I would say there's like some section that is easily 30-35% gray,
Mm,
with very rocky footing. So
nice.
if when you start doing repeats, when your legs start getting a little tired, and mentally, when you start getting fatigued, those are not exactly the place that you want to stumble, if you
For
will.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
And this was your first 200.
it is my first 200. I was actually signed up for Tahoe 200 in 2020. I it's all started 2019. I pasted a friend at Tahoe 200 2019, and I told him that, hey, if I'm going to pace you, I want to pace you the last 50 miles.
Nice.
And he said, "Why?" I guess because that's the 50 miles where you're going to be most messed up. I want to see that.
Right.
that's
Right.
the that's the best way to see a 200 because you're still going to be functional. The 100 miles, no problem. And we had some real fun. In we went through. We were climbing, and 10 o'clock in the morning, it was forecast to rain, and it rained at 10:01. And we kept climbing. Rain became snow. We were all like frozen, and so we have some adventure story from that. And the Tahoe 200 has a fun when you have the pacer bib. On the pacer bib, it actually say 200 mile runner in training.
Okay.
It's how they looped you in. So literally the week after I finished pacing him, crewing him, I signed up for Tahoe 200 in 2020.
Uh,
And unfortunately, that did not happen because of the pandemic, and they couldn't get permit for the event. And so I had been training June, July, or actually July, August rather, in 2020, just reconning all sections of the course on my own, and and decided that, well, since the event wasn't going to happen, I was going to do it as a fat ass, just do my roll my own version. And I have the logistics and crew to take care of how we can actually, basically the crew will meet us where the trail hit the highway, or there's a junction where the trailhead is. They'll meet us there. We'll reload, sleep, do whatever we need, and then keep going. And again, it's going to be 100 hours, 4 days, kind of a attempt. Well, luck have it, that weekend that was supposed to happen, Tahoe caught on fire.
Oh, okay.
So the entire Tahoe Rim park was closed, and we were still pushing on the verge of still, do we go or no go? But then came down to, well, what happens if my crew gets stuck because of the fire, or they have to deal with, and then further endanger other essential services because we're out there doing some crazy stunts, right? So,
Right.
and it was long story short is we decided to bail and regroup. And from there, I had two back-to-back events that I was crewing, Bear 100 as well as Moab 240.
Oh.
So that kind of took care of the next 4 weeks window, and then Tahoe started to snow, right? So my window of opportunity for 2020 was sort of slipping away. And I actually look at the end of 2020 trying to do something, local. There's actually an event called Headlands 150. So maybe, but then it was not exactly 200, so, but it's 150. Anyways, so didn't do that. And then kind of come back to 2021, and I was looking at, I take people up to Mount Tam all the time anyways. Just it's my sacred spot, if you
Okay.
will.
Yep.
Beautiful mountain. It's a small local mountain, 2,500 feet. It's not exactly super, super high. You're not dealing with elevation much, but glorious sunrise there. And I go up there all times of the day and take people all technical skills and background. There's never too slow. So long as I can show you the summit, we can get up there. Every summit is a different experience for me.
Yep.
And so and I'm in a different spot. I'm with different people. It's a different version of me, different scenery, different time of the day. So the experience is always unique. So it's this very special place for me. So I decided that maybe we'll try. And then really when the idea came of trying to do 200 miles, the first thing I did was I actually went back to Kati's race, her Strava, and I actually kind of reverse engineering look at her segments split, and I'm going like, okay, she's obviously a lot faster than me, and doing 200, I'm going to be going a lot slower. And to try to deal with the logistics of 4 days in a place where, how do we actually even get myself fuel and sleep? Do we car camp, and how do we actually figure out all of that? And then to deal with all the various technical aspect of it. How much vert are we looking at, and how many times do I need to get before we can bank up to 200 miles? And then and when I set up the pace chart, I actually created it's one of those crazy idea, right? There's actually a gray section that is above beyond 200 miles. There's another 50 miles that I've actually planned for. In the event, if I feel good, we'll keep going for 250. So that was the pie in the sky. It's kind of like the super A goal if we get there. But super happy when we got to 200. And I have some personal. My father had a vaccine appointment the next day for the second shot of that COVID vaccine. So to move that would mean that he might not actually get rescheduled for another. Who knows, right? So. It was a perfect race, and so we ended it on Monday, 6:30, after 4.5 days, 108 hours.
Crazy, man.
Yeah. Sometimes when you actually reiterate the numbers, like 108 hours that I actually, I slept for out of the 4.5 days. The night before, I usually, it's always hard to sleep anyways.
Yep.
I think I I had like the night before the race start, I slept for like 2 hours. So in 5.5 days, I slept for 7.5 hours. So in between that day's 5.5, 4.5 days, 5.5 hours of sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you set it up so that you had like a vehicle down there to sleep in, or do you live nearby, or how did that
Mm-mm.
work out? Or was it all trail naps?
I live about 40 minutes away
Okay.
from the base of the mountain. So fortunately, I have an awesome crew. Um, so this has been in the making for almost since the beginning of January. So a good buddy of mine, Bruce Wynn, I'm actually crewing and pacing him in 4 200s this year.
Whoa.
so he's definitely a badass. He's done quite a few of these Tile 200, Bigfoot, Moab. So he was actually, I wasn't crewing him at Moab, but he was there, and our crew kind of worked together a lot during that particular event. And he and I got spent a lot of time last summer training together for Tile 200 because he was signed up for the Triple Crown. So this is a guy that actually say, not one 200, but I'm going to do all three, right?
And
So
that's what he's doing this year. He's doing the Triple Crown.
the Triple Crown 2020, some of the events got canceled. So Bigfoot, so he did the virtual version, but so he's back in 2021, signed up for all three of Canada's Bigfoot 200, which is in August, Tile 200 3 weeks later, and then 3 weeks later, Moab 240. And then just to add things, because that's not enough, so May, he signed up for Aaron Viper's Cocodona 250. So
Wow.
I'm gonna be crewing him and pacing him at that race as well.
I'm gonna
So
have to talk to this guy as well, man.
yes, sir.
Sounds
Yeah,
like a stud.
yeah. So after Moab, he went to Moab with a minivan, tripped out minivan with like refrigerator, with a microwave, running off a battery, so he can actually run his compression boots and so on and so forth. But after that event, he realized that I can actually probably do better. So literally about 2 weeks after the event, he went out and bought an RV with his buddy, and this is we dubbed it. I mean, literally the first time I got to see it, I go, this is now called a UTM, Ultra Taj Mahal.
Awesome.
The rig has like a queen size bed, a separate room, like room for sleeping quarters. There's a bathroom with like you can actually not a tiny little bathroom, but like it used to be a sleeping area. They convert into a bathroom where there's standing shower,
Oh wow.
marine toilet, plenty of storage space, and then another dining room table that can convert into a queen size bed for the crew, and a couch, and then a full kitchen inside, and a cooking area on the outside. So so crewing him at Cocodona will be a joy, because we just basically roar forward to the next aid station, stop, and let him catch up to us,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But because the rig he bought it was in the end of 2020, there was a lot of learning experience for us. So we actually did two different exercise, kind of like dry run leading up to Jam on Tam.
Okay.
We did a kind of like an overnight trip in Mill Valley, kind of like Friday night. We'll stay over, and then we do a long run on Saturday, camp over, and then we realized that okay, we try to fire up the generator first time, and the generator like blooped out in like 5 minutes, right? So like we were all thinking, okay, we can use that to power all our compression boots after a long run. And the idea is that using that so that when we do like a big heavy day, like a 50K with 10,000 feet of verts, come back to the van, come back to the RV, we can run the compression boots, reset, go back out and hammer it again the next day. That's the back-to-back type of training that we were doing in the summer, but we did a lot of that through car camping, right? So power was the big thing. So out of that, we learned, and we decided that he decided that he needed to reinvest and add some solar panels, so that now it can be completely recharged. So he's engineering by trade, so that helps to be able to turn on and do all that handiwork. So he rigged up I helped him set up install the solar panels, and so now the whole thing is now we can actually go completely off grid for days. So long as there's power and sun, we can recharge all the electronics and anything that electricity power, 110 volt power refrigerator and keep all that running. And so figuring all of that took a couple of rounds of test dry running the rig. And okay, that didn't work. That's okay. Good thing we're not doing this on a big event.
Right.
And once we actually finally flush it out, so now we have, when we actually cut on my game day, he drove down from Sacramento to Mill Valley, and then we parked the rig at the base of the hill. So every time we come down, we have a place to go refuel, which is great for doing. So the loop in this particular case was 8 miles, so 3 up and then 4 change, 7.7. It's the exact mileage, so we call it around 8. But it means within about a mile and a half out, we have cell coverage, and I was able to do a live track through Garmin Connect, so people can follow me and so on and so forth. But the crew can follow exactly where am I on the mountain, right?
Nice.
And not to mention that they can actually anticipate, okay, he's about a mile out. I'll call in and say, hey guys, starving, love to have this.
Yeah.
And they can actually have everything ready, walk in, food, eat, and then go change, go to sleep, right? And so Bruce was saying it's probably too comfortable to having a break every 8 miles, right? Because when you go into the actual bigger race, your typical aid station is 20 miles,
Right,
10
right.
miles
Yeah.
plus. So you then tend to take more dirt nap.
For sure.
You don't need to. I have a bottle of water in my hand. That's it for every time I go up to the summit.
Oh, no kidding. No pack or anything.
No pack. I mean, the only time that I actually start wearing a pack was when after 140 miles, I start putting on poles, using poles to help a little bit just for stability and ease my quads and just it's so funny because I've seen people came in on day 3 on Sunday and they saw me and the people were doing the Jam on Tam challenge on their own, right? And they run into me and they go, like, how are you looking like the way you look? Because I was fresh, I was smiling, I was happy, I was cheery. I mean, it was perfect experience. I mean, people are like that. You don't look like you ran 160 miles, and you still got more to go, and you're still, you saw. I don't know. You saw the finished video.
Yes,
it was. That's how I felt at 200 miles coming in. Right. It was crazy. But that once I got the poles on, then I had the vest just to carry my water, so I have my hands free kind of thing. But outside of that, no, nothing. And then even just the pack was super light, and there's nothing else in it, just the water.
For sure.
Yeah.
You make it sound so easy, man.
It was. Well, I mean, there are certain things. I talked to a number of folks when people in the crew, my friends, and close circles the week before. There was a lot of different emotions, right? It is an unknown. There's that butterfly.
Totally.
Holy crap, what am I getting myself into? This is like, I've never, the most amount of elevation in one 100-mile race was Tahoe 200. I mean, seriously, Tahoe TRT, Tahoe Rim Trail 100 miles, which is about 24,000 feet. So this is easily a double.
Right.
So what I set out for was 26 laps, which is 66,000 feet. And so that was kind of like the goal. And then so even just that, it was kind of daunting as a number to think of, like, how would my quads feel? And Bruce, my crew chief, asked that, hey, do you have do we need to have a safe word, right? Like, what would be the what would be the dirty word that we have to say?
Right.
That it's our code that when that is uttered, it is now time to pull the plug, right?
Okay.
And I said to him, I go, no, I'm not going to have one because I'm just going to keep going. But I would tell you, going in, I had a little bit of the first couple of months, January, February, some of my runs, I have a little bit of issues on my right Achilles. And so I said that would be the only thing. Like if day 3 or day 4 in the morning, I wake up and I can't put weight on my foot, then that'll be a health issue that I would at that point reassess to go or no go. And sure enough, I mean, throughout the 4 days, the Achilles barked. Every time I stop and then get going again,
Mm-hmm.
I'd always have a little bit of a, what are you doing? Like, hello, I'm still hurt
Mm-hmm.
from 2 hours ago. And what ended up happening is that I would tell the whoever is with me, let's just walk the next little bit, and usually about a quarter mile. And fortunately, every time we leave the RV, it's always uphill, so it
Mm-hmm.
stretches the Achilles nicely. And so just give it patience and time, and then once you go through that first quarter mile, everything loosen up, and we're good. And
Yeah.
we kept going, and then it's kind of like they kind of go, really? That was fast. Like everything is fine. I'm like, yeah, it is. So I'm not gonna complain. I'm just gonna
No.
keep going.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was really, there was a lot of unknown, right? There was a lot of unknown being my first time going beyond 100 miles. I don't know how my body was going to behave. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like I have crewed a lot of folks, both 100 miles as well as 200-mile races
Mm-hmm.
and 240 and so on and so forth. And I've seen the carnage like day 3 and day 4 where they can't eat,
Mm-hmm.
stomach start to GI issues, or just you can only eat so many, even spring gel. I mean, you can only eat so much of that because that's not what your body is normally. I mean, when was the last time you take 30 or 72 hours just eating nothing but gels?
Yeah. Right.
No.
Yeah.
So why would you ever think that somehow magically, because you're in the middle of a race, that your body will now realize that, oh, it's okay, this is real food?
Mm-hmm.
So, I had a total plan B, two separate sets of liquid solution in that liquid calories in the event that when my stomach do turn south, that I have a backup plan B and plan C to go to. And
Tailwind, or what were you using?
so Spring has a new calorie base, a drink mix that
Mm-hmm.
actually give you 240 calories in 20 fluid ounce.
Okay.
And then I also was using a vegan powder drink that you can actually, they're great. It's called organic organs. That it's a vegan base, which give you 18 in a small. They usually come in a little small pre-mixed bottles,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like 12-ounce bottle that will give you like 18 ounce of proteins.
Mm.
And it's all made out of like chia seeds and
Okay.
nuts and so on and so forth. So it's an extract. So Bruce and I use that quite often as just kind of like a supplement to just a regular fuel, so that there's a liquid base, and also train the body to used to not necessarily taking solids, and so that in the event when you do go into that deficit where your stomach, be it's just having a bad time. I mean, I've done 100 miles where for 15 miles that my stomach just, everything I try to put something in, it just not liking it,
Yeah.
right? So I was able to turn on, just like sip a little bit of like nut butter, just chase it down with water, and so long as it stays down, then it goes down. But you think about it, it's still much easier if you can drink, if you're drinking fluids anyways, and if you can get calories in that fluids, you serve two purpose, right? You're getting hydration, you're getting nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And then so long as that's high over it, and then a lot of times your stomach will rebound, right? Will rally and
Mm-hmm.
then come back. But it's in between that period that's where you gotta have to hang tight and hang in there until it comes back.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I trained a lot over the course of this summer was trying to get into more fat burning,
Mm.
optimized. So a lot of keto type of strategies. So we'll go out, like I'll have like a 300-400 calories in the morning to start, and then I would literally go for like 10-12 hours. I'll have food on me, but I deliberately try to push the edge further. And it's really not just to, very similar to like fasted runs,
Mm-hmm.
but the goal is to teach your body that you got all of this fat in you that you can go tap in, and you just need to let it find it, and get used to that. Okay, I'm hungry, or I'm feeling a little tired because I'm hitting that first wall. And instead of immediately dumping sugar or dumping calories in it, let it work its way. Just slow down, gear down a little bit, and then let your body get used to go finding. And 9 out of 10 times, what I figured over the last 2, 3 years that I've been doing this and perfecting that exercise during my training runs, is that about 15 minutes later, I find I'm fine. I can keep going, and then all of a sudden now another 3 hours goes by. I haven't eaten anything yet,
Mm.
and the body actually, and having that as a backup skill
Yeah,
that your body can go to,
it's
so that
huge.
when you do have to go into that deficit because you're in the middle of a stretch where you can't eat, it's too hot, you can't put food back, you know that you can go into a little bit of a deficit and not actually go, you're not going to tank, right?
Yeah.
And some of that is also mental as well, to know that your mind can go there and you're not going to die,
Yep.
right? You're not going to crash. You still have the ability to keep moving. You just need to reason and let yourself know that I am okay. I'm still moving. I just need to get to the next stage. What is the next smallest step that I can get to before we can reset again?
Okay, so this is interesting because I'm doing my first 200 in September this year, and I'm sort of training my body the same way. I'm going really low carb, high fat. So
Excellent.
I'm doing pretty much the same thing that you were doing. When you say you were going out for training runs and you would eat 300 or 400 calories before taking off for the run, like what were you eating for breakfast before you started your day?
Like a egg white burrito, like a sausage eight muffin, things that I pick up from Starbucks first thing in
Okay.
the morning with a
Okay.
cup of coffee.
Yep.
So it's usually an hour, 2 hour drive going up to to Tahoe.
Hmm.
So pick that while I'm sitting in the car. I'll eat that, um, and then that's sort of set the base, right? And I what I found in the past when I first switched. Let me back up a little bit. In 2018, when I was doing TRT, 2 years prior, I DNF twice, and I was going through and using things like Tailwind as my, and again, for other people, for other athletes that actually are faster, they're out there a shorter period of time, those sugar-based type of solutions would work just fine for them, right?
Yep. Yep.
But I especially back then, I'm definitely the mid and back of the pack,
Mhm.
and so you are actually out there for the full durations of whatever, a lot of time. So everything is just longer, right?
Yeah.
And you're going slower. The climb is going to take longer. Yada yada yada. It's just so you have to get used to that idea. So in 2017, I had a really bad reaction. I had 55 miles into 100 miles of TRT, my gut start to actually acting up. It's one of those things that I've experienced before. I know normally, usually kicking around mile 80. So when you're at mile 80, you can suck it up for another 20 miles. But 55 is way too early,
Right.
and it became a debilitating pain in my lower abdomen, and it eventually radiated to my kidneys in the back. And so when I got to like 70, the last 10 miles was just all walking, and eventually I timed out at 80. But I gotten further second time. So what I realized was I need to overhaul my strategy as far as nutrition.
Yep.
So one of the key things that I've taken out was sugar.
Yep.
So I was very adamant about learning to teach the body to use real food.
Hmm.
And I've also taken in my hydration no electrolytes in the form of like mixed drinks. Like, not, I used to use Roctane and Goo and so on. So the tip, the classic, right?
Yep.
Tailwind. So I switched to just salt taps and water.
Okay.
So I can regulate how much electrolytes I can put in depending on the weather,
Hmm.
right? If it is a super hot day, 90 degrees, I'm climbing and I'm pouring sweat, I'm going to do like 2 tablets every 90 minutes, right? Just to keep on top of it. But if it's nighttime, it's cooler, I'm not sweating as much, I'm going to dial it down to like 1 tablet. So I can regulate it based on how I feel and how the weather is, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's the electrolyte part of it. I was using a product called UCAN,
Oh yeah.
which is a super starch that give you a very equal um, time release as far as energy goes.
Hmm.
And that was great. I actually went to the vendor and I said, well, I'm trying to use your product for like a 100-mile race. Like, do you have any stats as far as like customers that use your product for what is the longest duration that they've used it? And he said, well, 17 hours. That's an easy number that I can give you because we have Ironman people use our product all the time,
Okay.
which is great. But I'm beyond 17 hours. I'm looking
Right.
at more like 30 hours or plus.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, well, all right. I said, give me the products. I will be your guinea pig. I'll give you the stats.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm happening is that 20 hours into 100 miles, perfect, even keel, very, very solid. I was never hungry. It was just the right amount. The two byproduct that they did actually tell me was that one is because of starch, so you get very gassy, you get very bloated, and the longer you use it, the more it becomes bloating.
Okay.
So you end up having a lot of gas, so you
Mm.
fart a lot during the run, which is no big deal. I mean, we all runners, we do that, take care of that. But it's uncomfortable when it's in your system until you can
Right.
release, right? And the second thing is it's the flavor profile. It's not exactly, it's kind of like chalk. So it's not exactly the easiest thing to consume
Sure.
over a long period of time. When you just keep eating the same flavor, you get flavor fatigue.
Yep.
So that's the other thing that I learned is that um, the diet or whatever the nutrition, you need to have variety
Yep.
so that your taste palette is not getting fatigue of the same flavor, texture, and even just consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Liquid versus, what have you. So having a rotation of different types, like I would use things like beef jerky, dried mango, trail mix, so just different textures, sweet, savory, mixing back and forth, and then mixing in these like liquid fluid, liquid fuel, like the vegan drinks that actually are high in proteins that actually will help you rebuild your muscles when you're actually in long durations where you get a lot of wear down in your muscles. Where are you going to be? What kind of bar you can eat that can give you 18 grams of proteins in one
Right.
serving?
Yeah.
So when you are at the back end of that kind of of mileage, that can be extremely useful. It's funny because in this particular 200, not once have I felt like, oh, wow. Like, I was fully expecting by day 3, when I wake up in the morning, that my quads will be like, just like super, super tight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my crew row me with like like a out-of-day bar,
Yep.
stick rather, each time I come in, and just basically the front quads and the glutes and the hamstrings and so on and so forth. And it's not like we have a big, long rolling exercise. I also use the compression boots. I use a pair called Elevated Legs. They're like the air chamber boots that was able to, every time I want to go to sleep, like 30 minutes, 2 hours, that pair of boots is on the entire time. So it really helped flush out the lactic
Do
acids.
you feel like that was a big help?
It was a big help for me, and it was a big help for the guys who used it at Tile 200 and Moab.
Okay.
Bruce is, every time that's why he tripped out his van to make sure that it was power, so he can actually get his boots working.
Got it. Okay.
So that just having that compression exercise working through the flip side of also using the boots is the day after my 200, I pretty much sat in the boots for like 4 hours, not consecutively, but throughout the day, cumulatively about 4 hours. Literally by day 2, I was staying with a friend of mine who taking care of me. He said, like, dude, you're walking around like you didn't run the 200, and not
Mm.
especially with that kind of vert.
Yeah.
It was huge as far as my recovery
Okay.
process. So
Nice.
I highly recommend it. Elevated Legs is
Okay.
the name of the company, and they are based out of Colorado. Um, Small mom and pop shop, and the pricing is a lot cheaper than compared to like the super duper Normatec $2,000. When
Yep.
you talk about like $700 for a pair, and you really think about it as a runner that do a lot of running, how many times first do you actually, how much does it cost for you to get a massage, right? And how long is a massage? Is an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Here I actually, the day after, I have 4 hours of it. So if you think about the number of massage throughout a 1 year period, how much you would invest in that, and then you apply that in terms of I can now do this every day. Every time I finish a long workout, when I was training in for Tile 200, I would go out and hammer out like a 50K with 9 to 10,000 feet of birds, come back and sit in the boots overnight, 2 3 hours. I'll go back out and do hill repeats on huge steep climbs, and it's like I have fresh legs. The downside I always tell people is that yeah, it's great to have a tool that can enable you to flush out the lactic acid in your legs to give you that fresh leg sensation. But you need to be careful, because if you keep doing that every day, you come back, you flush out, and next day you got fresh legs, and you go hammer harder, and you're not respecting rest days. You're not actually letting the muscles heal and grow stronger. So ultimately, you will get into in potential injury situations, right? But having, I've introduced that to so many runners, just professional athletes, as well as just regular runners who's starting. It's been a game changer for me.
Cool. So it sounds like you're just taking this thing to the next level. You're changing your diet around. You're running farther than ever. What else can you attribute to this? Just bumping up to this next level.
So a couple of things, and I heard people talk about when you go into a 200, it's a soul searching journey, right? There's certain things that especially in a tough race, like tougher race where you're out in the wilderness for hours, 20 miles at 20-minute pace, you talk about 8 to 10 hours, right? By yourself sometimes, or with a pacer. Yep. In this particular case, each loop is for me, it was about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours duration. So we never really have that kind of stretch. But we were going up the mountain 24 hours nonstop, right? Apart from when we sleep or take a break to eat. So different part of the day. A lot of times my pacer are with me, and the people that pacing me, and it's great to have different people come in, so we have different conversations. But especially in the nighttime, I specifically asked Bruce to be the anchor for me. And a lot of times when we're at night, we don't talk. Sure. We're just hammering up the hill and just grinding it through. And he knows I know he's there and as support. That's really all that is. Sometimes pacing doesn't require to be constantly filling the silence with talking, right? Talking take efforts. And just the fact that we're working together, making sure we're both safe. That's all we really need. Gone through, I think the interesting learning experience for me in this particular exercise is that being a person that have to actually crew other people a lot, the hardest thing for me is to surrender, to let go of the control that I need to let my crew take care of me, to give up that control, right? There's certain goals as far as each loop's supposed to take a certain amount of time. By this time we should actually, by day 1.5, that chart went out the window, right? So my good friend Victor Belazieros, the guy from who created Victory Sports Design, he talks about a pace chart. I always create one because it gives the crew a starting point, a framework to work with. And I use that even, a lot of times on a smaller, shorter distance, like a 100-mile race, as a packing list, because it kind of gives me an idea. Okay, well, if I'm getting to mile 60 at this particular time, I'm going to need headlamps. I'm going to need extra clothes. So that becomes a good checklist as far as from packing and planning and preparing for the race, and mentally give you a sense of, okay, and also for your crew, right? Okay, we need to be here. Okay, this is going to be 3 o'clock in the morning. What kind of logistics challenge are we going to run into? So, but the pace chart at the end of the day, when you created it, it's a paper reality, right? And there is the race day reality where when things are just not start coming off the wheel, the wheels coming off the wagon, or you just start to storm. Like second night, we went up to the top of Tam and expecting at 10 o'clock it's just gonna rain a little bit. Like when we got to the top, it was 30-mile hail windstorm with pouring rain sideways, right? So I take this photo every time I get to the door. I climb up to the door, top of the door, and I had these little number cards for each time I summit to show the number. I was carrying 2 years ago when I did it in 2019, I was carrying a whiteboard and write the number. So I'm like, this is too big to carry. The card is way smaller, so I just stuck it in my pocket. So that was kind of like the improvised improvement for 2021.
Yeah.
Stepped down from that photo, and then literally the wind blew me 3 steps sideways. That was how strong the wind was, right? So we had to hunker down in the bathroom at the base of just when we came down. There's a parking lot and there was a bathroom, so we had to hunker down and dry up, and we're doing jumping jacks in there trying to keep warm. And in about an hour, the rain stopped, and then we were able to just safely make it home back to the RV and change out and get warm and get food and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah.
but it's a mountain race, so there's always something, even as small as a mountain as Mount Tam, compared to we were at Tahoe, we're climbing these 9,000 foot, at elevation and altitude where snow, even though in September we hit snow.
Yeah.
I mean, at 9,000 feet, if it's raining at 7, you guarantee at 9,000 it's snowing.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you come up from 7 in 2019 when I was pacing, there were people that are still behind us, still coming up. When we got to 9,000, they were still coming up, which means they're going through the rain, going into colder temperature, and people have to be med-evac'd out because of hypothermia,
Yep.
right? So mountain race is real, and you need to have your safety gear, and you can never take safety precaution as this is just 3 miles. We'll 3 miles is all it takes. All it takes is just you getting wet, and then your temperatures start dropping and you start shivering, and hypothermia will kick in faster before you know it. You can't control that, right? So, but the big thing is there's a lot of unknown, right? There's an unknown of beyond 100 miles. I don't know what my body was going to feel like. I've never done this in that kind of vert, but I think after we were I had a request for the crew that no social media until we hit the previous record, which is 105 miles. So once we surpass that, then we can actually let the social media go out, and then it got picked up. By Jam was actually saw that, and he was Jamel he's doing the Barkley right now, but he was following us, and it was kind of cool to give us a
saw
shout
that.
out. Yeah, and but I have also a group of people that was just live tracking me, and then we start posting the live track on social media, and all of a sudden, even just more people. How I knew there was a lot of people following me was because every time the live track go dead, I start getting a swamp of phone calls. It's like, hey, dude, where are you? The feed is dead. So I had to reset on my phone and get it back up. And so that was kind of fun to see that, knowing that there's a bunch of people out there following along.
That helps. Yeah.
It's there's cheers, there's texts and say, kudos, what you're doing, amazing, keep going. But I also realized that there's a lot of people that actually following me were people that I've taken up to TAMP before, so they can visualize what our trip or our journey, and just kind of seeing that, my God, he's on his 17th summit and he's still going, and it's the middle of the night and people wake up and it's like, is he still going? The dog's still moving? Yes, so that was kind of fun. First time. It's not the first time I have hallucination. It's definitely it wasn't as bad. I mean, I at Moab last year when I was pacing, I mean, I was seeing stuff on the trail while I was walking, right? Literally in front of my feet, there was plastic trays to keep popping up on the conveyor belt. It's like, okay, I need some caffeine, and 20 minutes later I was fine.
Right.
I've actually seen hallucination, and I kind of figure out. Took me about 300-mile race to dial in my caffeine strategy for my night game. The trick is, though, and you go into a 200-mile race, the same caffeine strategy doesn't work for 100 miles. 100 miles, the strategy that you use for a 100-mile race, doesn't apply to 200 because you have to sleep. So you can't just muscle it through. Okay, well, 100 miles is 30 hours, so it's one 24-hour period. I can just take caffeine and power through it. and get to the circadian clock of the next morning, then I'm good. I might be
Mm-hmm.
a little tired by the end of it, but I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are going for 4.5 days or longer, potentially, you can't really just keep muscling through because you will just start tripping and seeing things, right?
Yeah.
So what we are able to do is just okay, go as far as and maybe sometimes do like a 30-minute nap, power up, and then chuck like espresso shot or what have you, caffeine up so that I'm good for another 6-8 hours, and then I sleep again. As whenever I'm tired, I need to sleep, then I sleep. But I'm fortunate. Like my previous life, I used to travel a ton. I used to fly about 100,000 miles a year. So
Mm.
power napping it's a skill that I've acquired and honed
Nice.
very, very, very well.
Okay.
So I can actually just literally shut down. Like it could be the noisiest place. I can just close my eyes and go to sleep for like 10 minutes, and that's a skill is you very, very useful on 200s,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when you don't have the facilities and the availability of a crew to take care of you and the housing, that you got to be doing dirt naps. Bruce will attest to this, and this is his theory that you can be going, you'd be so tired you may be trucking along at 30-minute mile. If you can actually take a nap for 10 minutes, you'd be back to 20-minute pace,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Just because your mind is a little sharper, and a lot of times it's actually more danger when you are tired and you're not thinking straight and trying to push forward
Mhm.
than if you take a nap and have that clarity, because you're navigating by yourself, and you're not thinking straight, and you're just your reasoning capacity is not as good, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a huge thing.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah, I talked to Avery Collins, and he's done some of the longer races, of course. And he mentioned one of his tips to me was take some caffeine before you lay down to go to sleep, so that when you wake up in 20 or 30 minutes, it's kicking in right there.
Right.
But it sounds like you were doing like espresso shots or something like that. So you'd wake up, do a little caffeine, and then just get moving.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Starbucks double espresso shots. They're a 4-ounce can,
Oh yeah.
and within one can is 150 milligrams of caffeine.
Okay.
So typically, what I would do on 100, I know what my sleep deprivation window is, which is usually about 22 hours into a 24-hour race, and plus again the night before you don't sleep well. So I usually take the way I do it is wake up. If I wake up at 3 o'clock for a 5 o'clock start, I will start from 3 a.m., count forward 18 hours. That's when I take my first dose of caffeine,
Well,
so that by the time when I hit 22-hour, I already have caffeine in my system to kind of keep me afloat.
yep.
And then every 3 or 4 hours, I will take another shot until sunrise. And
Okay.
once the circadian clock kicks in the next day, that's that I'm good for the duration. But that works for 100 miles,
Right.
right? And I've actually worked with a number of runners, friends of mine, that they said, dude, I've never been able to stay awake for 100 miles. I'm always like crashing like through the night, and it's just really hard to struggle when you're at that 65 to 80 15-mile window when you're tired. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and your body just like not alert. And so I would go out and do like night runs with them and basically test out that caffeine strategies on
Hmm.
them. And then so that when we'll do a start a night run at 12 o'clock, go till like 4 o'clock, sit for an hour, and then go do a sunrise run. And then just to make sure that caffeine will actually get in the system in that 18 4-hour window until sunrise. And then sunrise the next morning is like, I'm still awake. How did I
Right.
do that?
Right.
So,
Right.
but Avery's, I just don't necessarily want to take caffeine before I go to sleep. Although I'm the kind of person that I can take a cup of coffee at dinner and I can still go to bed at a couple hours later. So
Right.
what I do is in the event when leading up to a big event, I will caffeine fast for at least
Oh,
like 2 weeks prior, so
nice.
that when I do put caffeine in my system, it'll just be turbocharged, and it will just be much more sensitive to that. So that's what I did for this particular event as well.
Cool. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I think that's a great plan to implement, especially when you're going this long, man. So, you mentioned a couple times that you regularly take people up and down TAM.
Yeah.
Are you guiding? Are you? I know you're a running coach as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is it like coaching clients or friends, or is this just a regular Saturday for you?
Sunrise is a special place for me on TAM. So I will anybody that actually wanted to see it, so long as they're willing to get up at four by by the bottom of the hill by 4:30, I'll go. Uh,
Okay.
and midday, midweek, it doesn't matter. I one person, a group. I've taken hundreds of people up to TAMP, and it just a something that I enjoy sharing and seeing the people's faces when they actually see the sunrise the first time, and that experience, it's always new for me. And so I enjoy it. I enjoy doing that, and no charge, not yet. Anyways, not as a pay service.
Right.
I
Right.
I just do it for the fun of it. Yeah.
Well, that's something that you and I share then, because I'm the same way, man. I love getting people up and down peaks, especially for their first time and seeing the look on their face. Sunrises, that's just a bonus. Sunsets are always cool too. I live in Boulder and I'm right at the bottom of a
Oh,
handful of mountains. And so, yeah,
yeah.
whenever anyone comes to visit me, like I just love getting people up the peaks, and conversely, I love getting people into finish lines too. It sounds like you've done a bunch of
Absolutely.
crewing and pacing. I just love being a part of it. It's a blast,
Absolutely.
man.
People ask me like, why do you do like, if you look at my social media, you'll see that I have like, so many different races that I probably crew as many races as I run
Yeah.
in a given year. And nothing gives me more joy than seeing the people crossing the finish line. And that is as good as me crossing the finish line, which
Mhm.
is what you share. But I have a very particular soft spot in the first time,
Yeah.
meaning that anytime when, like, for example, this whole 200 experience, while I was actually running it, I was talking to all my crew, and again, I cannot give them, there's four people that actually are my core crew. Bruce, which took care of Bruce Wynn, who's took care of all the technical aspect of it. Kendall Young and his wife Cindy Young, they're like my brother and sisters, and literally from another mother, and they literally took care of all the other needs, that food, comfort, changing clothes, having a hot towel in my face when I walk in, kind of little things like that to patch me back together so I can get back out there and keep doing what I'm doing. And then Norman Law, which is actually a good friend of mine, he was there with Kendall, helped me in 2019 when I did the first FKT.
Mhm.
And except this time we have a place for them to sleep as opposed to sleep in their car. 2019, I just did everything out of the trunk of my car, which is very different experience, right? So
Yeah.
it's progressively you're supposed to make it harder and better and anyways, and then I have three lovely friends that actually came by and paced me through different section of it. But the point is that the crew made a huge difference in this whole experience. I mean, I couldn't say enough. And again, they said, well, you've always done this for other people, so it's our turn to give back to you. And it was hard to surrender myself into their care
Mhm.
at the beginning, because I'm so used to being the person in charge, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But we talked. I remember distinctly when I was running with each one of them. They paced me laps as well. We talked about the finishing shot, what it's supposed to look like how, from me running down the stairs to having a reverse camera shooting up me running down, and how we got to piece all that together. And like, I'm getting to this section, you got to pan right so that we can actually see me running side by side a little bit before I actually run away from you. Just to visualize. And the reason why I say that is because I remember the first time when I crossed 100 mile. Once I crossed the finish line, I bawl like a child, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It was just like you held it together for so long, and then finally that all those emotions just kind of released, and it was the greatest feeling. But I was very grateful that I had somebody that actually filmed it for me, because I don't remember any of it when I crossed at the time, right? All I was just like, get over that stupid line.
Hmm.
and everything hurt. And so inside, it's a different sensation when you look at it. I still look at that video today, and I still get emotional when
Oh,
I
totally.
see it,
Yeah.
right? So that is the gift that I want to give others. When I know, like there's one time at a 100-mile race where I was pacing a runner for the last 25 miles, and she dropped. She ended up dropping. So I ended up going back to the finish line, and it was in the Headlands, Headland 100. And the finish line is about, it's the runners, you can see them up the hill coming down. So for the next probably like 4 hours, I ran up and down the hill 18 times and just filming total strangers
Oh,
coming in through the finish.
that's cool.
And they're like, who are you? And I'm shoving a camera in their face, right? And filming their finish. And so, like, you're finishing your first 100? Great. What's your name? Blah, blah. Just some general question. How do you feel?
Mhm.
Basically the same questions that my crew was asking me. And then at the end, I text them and say, give me your email address and I'll send this video to you.
Nice.
And it's a simple gift,
Yeah.
but they will always remember that moment. And I've still had people that actually came up to me randomly in Tahoe last year and say, you're Michael Lee. You filmed my finish at Headlands, and just random, total random, right? But I said yes, and it's like a small circle that we reconnect back on a different hill somewhere down 2 years
Right.
later.
Right.
Yeah,
That's a cool gift because, yeah, I've had people do the same thing for me. Even photos, just, it's funny. You can look at these photos at a finish line of a 100-mile race, and it's like you go right back there. You remember all
instant.
the
Yeah,
emotions. You remember what your legs were feeling like, how grateful you were to have your friends and pacers with you. And yeah, that's a cool gift, man. I like it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say, while we're on the subject of being emotional, I think once I roll over 100 miles, like I think the record was 105, and then when we did 108, that was when we came back to the RV, and then I think for the next 30, 40 miles, there will be moment that I'll be running by myself, or I have somebody in front of me, or on a single track. It'll just all of a sudden I start tearing up,
Yeah.
just having either seeing myself finishing, visualizing what will feel like, or just being grateful of the friends that actually came and stuck with me for the last 72 hours
Hmm.
and just labor over my care, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that's a level of gratitude that you would never feel. I mean, that's pretty special. So, I mean, I cannot give them enough credit for what they've done for me to make me feel the way I feel when I finish.
Yeah.
What you guys saw at the finish, it's purely the result of being taken care of really, really well.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, I'm not really generally a very emotional guy, but yeah, sometimes in these races I'll hit like mile 60 or 70 and all of a sudden I'm just like welling up with tears and I'm just like,
Yes, I
and it's
know.
like
I know the feeling.
but yeah, it's a happy cry, of course, and you
Totally happy
got to
cry.
let it out. And
Absolutely.
one year I did Western States 100, and super lucky. I had some really good friends that flew all the way across the country to pace me,
Right.
and they were just genuine quality pacers, great friends. And I wasn't really emotional when I finished. Like everything was pretty normal. I was tired. I recovered. I rested. I flew back home, and my dog had been. She was in doggy daycare for the weekend while I was out there at the race. And then I went to go pick up my dog, and all of a sudden it just hit me. As soon as I
Like,
saw my dog, I just started
oh,
bawling. And the lady at the counter's like, I guess you're really happy to see your dog, aren't you? I'm like, you wouldn't believe how happy I am. And it went
yeah,
on for like a day. I just cried for like a day, and it was just a happy cry. It was
absolutely,
a great
absolutely.
release. And yeah, again, I'm not really all that emotional of a person, but you got to do that once in a
Oh,
while.
yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. I mean, like, I think when you put your body through that kind of extreme,
Yep.
and you go through that deep of digging deep in your soul to
Yeah.
trying to go accomplish something like this,
Yeah.
and there's that whole element of fear, right? Like the fear of the unknown,
Mhm.
and just this is like crazy, no, the amount of vert has no 200 has this amount of vert, right? So I'm doing this my first 200,
Right.
and I'm doing this a fat ass just pulling out of the sky, right? And so there's that always that constant reminder you're trying to do something that is never been done before,
Mhm.
and so there's and I talked to some couple of friends that the days leading up to it, there's the moment of doubt, and then I have to talk myself out of it and saying, look, you can't go there. You just got to deal with one loop at a time. You got to go look at, you already plan everything you have the infrastructure, you have the logistics, you've mitigated every possible scenario that, and then even then during the 4 days, there are scenarios that happened, right? And the crew took like, it's not your problem.
Mhm.
It's not your problem. I don't want you to think about it.
Mhm.
Let us take care of it.
Mhm.
Just keep go. Just go and do what you do. And to let go and not be in charge mode,
Mhm.
right? That was really hard.
Mhm.
But the moment I surrendered into that, that was the best feeling. And I, I heard this quote. Somebody said to me one time, the other side of impossible is a wonderful feeling, right? When you reach there, it's an amazing feeling, and but getting there, takes a little work and takes a little perseverance.
Mhm.
But when you do get through that impossible, that stays with you, and it's a unique feeling that you'll never forget.
Totally. Well, it just opens things up. It's like if I can do this thing that seemed impossible 6 months ago, what
Right?
what else can I do? You know?
Let's go find a next impossible, right?
Totally, totally. How many hundreds had you done leading up to this? It looks
So
like you got a lot of races on Ultra Sign Up, but
yeah,
how many
yeah.
hundreds?
So I have done a total of six. Let's see, one, two, three. Yeah, 600.
Nice.
And then I have two that I actually didn't finish. Two Headlands 100 finished, TRT, and two Rio de Lago. So I have five 100 finish and two DNFs
Okay.
out of that.
Okay.
So seven attempts, five finish,
Yeah.
and this is my first 200.
Yeah. Right on. Well, let's reverse engineer this a little bit. Like, how did you get into this crazy world?
Oh wow. Mm. So by trade, I used to run a software consulting training company for a good 25, 30 years. So that's my background, technical, and that's which leads to a lot of the logistic planning and number crunching. When I saw Kati's 100 miles, I literally went back to her Strava and reverse engineering each segment, and I send back to her a chart, a Excel spreadsheet, and I say, did you know that this is your split? Like you are on the mark every single up and down to if you're slower on the ascent, you make it up on the descent. If you're slow on the
Ah,
descent, you're on a faster. And she goes like, oh my God. I mean, I've never thought of, looking at that, but I'm a numbers guy, right?
yeah.
Never speaks to me. And I'm a strong believer in unless you measure and you track things, and some people are, hey, everything is by feel.
Mhm.
I'm by numbers. So
Okay.
like if I can measure data, measure numbers, that's how I can see where I can tweak to improve. And so so that's kind of my previous background. 2000, the crazy story is 2008, because I used to travel so much, I used to weight at the highest point 215 pounds.
Oh, really? No
Yeah.
kidding.
And that was just, I was fairly athletic and active when I was in school, high school, and in college. I was working like three jobs when I was going through college, paying for my own way. And then career started, and then not about 2 years into it, I started my own company, and I was doing consulting ever since. And so the career take off, but then you sit on your butt a lot because I'm my IT, and the standing desk or having this whole treadmill under your desk back in the days was just not sitting on a one of those it's exercise ball is probably the coolest thing that we had at the time. But
Right.
but anyways, long and short is, I took about 4 months off when my best friend was getting her having her first baby, and she was living in Malaysia at the time. So I went over there. My clients didn't know that I was actually spent time and end up living in. I was away. I would still dial in all the conference calls
Wow.
and video like Zoom like this. It's just that it's 2 o'clock in the morning in Asia, right? So I would work from 10 p.m. to like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'll go to sleep. So my office have no clue, that I'm away, right? I'm working the same shift as my staff,
Sure.
and by 3 o'clock I'll sign off. I'll sleep for a couple hours. When I wake up, I'll reply to any of the emails and questions and things so that when they start the next morning, they'll have their marching orders. And then all of a sudden I have, well, it's now 10 o'clock in the morning. I get till 10 o'clock at night, another 12 hours. So I start exercising and changing my diet. And in about 6 months, I lost about 60 pounds.
Mm.
So when I returned to the US, I was 145 from 215.
Wow.
And well, as of I weighed it myself before the 200, I was 155 going in.
Mm.
The day after, I was 156 coming
Whoa.
coming
Nice.
out of it.
Okay.
So it was, and then of course the next couple of days there was some fluctuations, water weights, and so on and so forth. But happy to report, I'm back to 156
Nice.
exactly on the
Nice.
dot. So
Cool.
yeah, so that actually tells you, and again, it's numbers, right? I track and I measure, and it's not so much of the like the weight itself, but it just gives me a guide, like whether I feel right, I eat right, I didn't drop 10 pounds, or it's not a significant swing that I deprived my body. I mean, I was eating. I mean, literally, even to the very last day, I was hungry. I was
Mm.
hungry throughout. So that was a perfect race, if you will.
Yeah.
No blisters, no GI issues. I mean, the only minor issues that I have is my two pinkies on either side. I had a bit of a hot spot, so got that tape, and then Bruce, in his wisdom, brought me a pair of shoes that is one full size bigger.
Yep.
So once we got to 100 miles, I jumped into those. Never actually even felt anything, and
Nice.
so I mean, again, any kind of minor issues, like we have some chafing, we tape it up, and that was it. I mean, considering I didn't even actually, I never even got a cramp, and the entire 4.5 days.
Mm.
I mean, it's just crazy to think of. I think part and parcel had to do with the terrain, because you're climbing, and then when you actually go to the descent, you're using different muscle group,
Sure.
right? And then there's a section that is sort of like a mile down to the bottom of the hill, which is unpaved. So you switch in using different gear because it's not as it's flat. It's. And then when you hit the bottom, you come back and you're climbing that 1 mile again. I mean, Walmsley did that same ascent in 2000, I think 16 or 17, and he still hold a course record like 30 minutes, and change, right? But that's Walmsley.
Yeah.
Um, and he's also not doing 200 miles, but I'm sure he was still probably doing way faster. But the point is because I was rotating and using different muscle groups. So I mean, it was, and then when I switched to poles, be able to turn on, take some of the load off using my upper body. So that helps, and that's something that I would still say. Anytime when you're doing a 200-mile race, poles are going to be huge
Hmm.
asset. Even though some of the parts, like when we get to the top on this particular climb, there's 150 feet that where we have to scramble, literally hands and knees, to get to the top, and it's the way the route is designed that you have to scramble up. There is actually a hiker path that you can hike up, but the official segment on Strava is you have to scramble up. So poles is not an option, right? So we just fold it and tuck it, and then hands and knees, and do whatever scramble we did. But the poles were certainly useful on the descent, especially on the back half of it, where when your legs are just a little bit more fatigued,
Hmm.
and it just mentally give you that extra balance, right?
Hmm.
So it was useful for me, personally speaking, and other might have different opinions about poles, and some people find poles to be slowing you down. In 200 miles, you're not going super fast
Yeah.
anyway.
Right.
So,
Right.
if I can actually take any kind of leverage, I'm gonna take advantage of it if the race are if it's allowed during as part of the race.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Um, So going back a little bit,
Yeah,
so you lost like 60 pounds, I think you said, and then
I was never a runner, by the way.
yeah. So how
Any,
did you?
any of that. I actually did during that 6 months. Thanks for circling back. During that 6 months, I was doing a lot of cardio exercise, ellipticals. I was doing weights,
Okay.
and so it started in 30. I think it was at the beginning. I was doing 30 minutes workout, and then I'd take a nap after that, and then by the end of that 4 5 months window, I would working out like 4 hours a day. Like sometimes I'll go twice to the
Mhm.
gym, right? Totally gym rat. And it never once ran. Never. I got back to the States in February of 2009, and I had a buddy who is an Ironman,
Mhm.
Terry Dizzler. And Terry, it's like a super athlete, right? I mean, he and I used to speak in the same public speaking circuit for tech conferences. And so, he's always, oh, I just did another Ironman. And so he sent me an email and say, hey, I'm looking for fundraising or whatever. So I donated. And then he wrote me a race report back. It was the beginning when in 2009, I read that. I was like, oh, sorry to report that I did the Louisville Ironman and I DNF'd. I had to look up what DNF stand for.
Right.
And then he said, oh, after 17 hours, I DNF'd. I'm like, holy crap. I thought I work out for 4 hours. I'm pretty badass. Like, how do you do for 17 hours? So now I have to go look up what exactly is an Ironman, right? The 2.5 mile swim, 110-mile bike, and yada, yada, yada. And then you do a marathon. I'm like, okay, I don't even know if I can do a marathon at the end.
Right.
And so that's how it started. So my journey of running started in August 2009, joining Team and Training, the purple shirts at all these row races.
Yep.
And it's funny because I went to the first info session in like the summer. There's a forum. I checked immediately, and it's like, oh wow, this like if you've raised a certain amount of dollars, your first race could be Santa Barbara or Hawaii marathon. I'm like, hello, like they pay for your hotel, they pay for your flight to go to Hawaii, and
Perfect.
I'll just book out a couple extra days and fly back later, and there's a vacation right there, right?
Mhm.
And I used to still travel at times. I've got points, and so, and then I filled it, signed it, and I was waiting for everybody else to fill in, and I look back up at it again, and there's a double header option. So this is kind of like back even then at that point, it's kind of like that crazy idea, like that boundary issues, if you will. There was a double header option, and that is in the 4 months leading up to the Honolulu Marathon, halfway through, you can do a half marathon. But because it's two events, you have to fundraise twice the amount, two fundraiser. The fundraising was not the least of my problem. Like most people was like, holy crap, I have to raise 9 grand or whatever, right? The total combined. And I was have tons of business contacts, so I just basically worked the clock and worked my mailing list, and the fundraising was the easy part. It
Okay.
was even dawned on me to like, but then I thought, hell, if I'm going to actually do a marathon in 4 months, I better be able to do a half marathon halfway through, right? That's
Right.
the logistics that I went with.
Yep.
And so I signed up for that, did both, and had a great time. And then, wow, if this is good, more must be better, right? So the 2010, I start signing up for like a marathon, a row marathon every quarter, and a half marathon every month, right? And just kind of go at it. And of course, like, took me about 6 months before my IT band started to like completely just bark and say, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right.
And then dial back, lay off, just kind of rest and got. And I one thing that I'm really good at, I think it's because this whole exercise of transforming from what used to be a heavier version of me and get into a healthier version of me, and that's like a lifestyle change, right? A better choice in food, food options, just be mindful in terms of what I'm putting in my body, and also balance, to exercise and not necessarily say, okay, well, healthier means that I'm not going to eat sugar. It just means that I'm going to be better understanding, okay, well, if I have craving for a chocolate bar, I'm going to have one, but I'm going to take something else off to equal it out, or I'll just do smaller portion of it, just have a taste. So I'm not getting myself deprived of it. And when you deprive yourself of something, leads to overdoing and compensation, right? So I think that learning that balance was a key um, strategies across all disciplines of the new version of me, right? And so in doing that, I think that taught me, okay, when your body is not agreeing with you, slow down, give it time. And I think this new lease in life, new lease, new version, new body, it makes me appreciate, I don't necessarily be the fastest runner. I don't chase, I tried. I used to run tracks when I was in high school, but I don't necessarily go for, I can still clock, if I really want to, I can still clock like a 7:30 mile if I want to, but there's a lot of tear. There's a lot of breakdown and potential injury. And I also recognize in the last 10 years doing these kind of running that my body don't recover and heal as fast as it was, say, 20 years ago. And so, like for example, in 2019, I did a 100 miles race, Rio del Lago here in California. And then it was a perfect race. I mean, I had a great finish. I enjoyed it. I soloed it the first 75 miles, and a friend that actually paced me the last 25 in finishing. But then when I finish, my left shin swelled up for some reason, just right above the ankle, and it has a big swelling. And it took, literally 3.5, 4 weeks before I can actually start even consider going back on running. And even then so I gave it another 2 weeks. So 6 weeks just laying back and chilling out and letting my body do its thing. And then I went back out and did a 10-mile run up to Mission Peak, and it was like great. I felt perfect. So being patient and being kind to your body, and one thing that I was very patient about, especially after the 200, is recovery. Like I literally slept anytime when I feel like I'm tired. And fortunately, my schedule of work enabled me to turn on, have a lot of flexibility. So, when I'm tired, I sleep. And if I can bank in a 12-hour night, I always feel better the next day. So I think that, and just being gentle and being kind after you ask your body for such a big effort, to let it do its thing, whatever it takes to recover. I mean, but then the funny thing is, like 5 days later, so on Mondays when I finish, Sunday I went back out and said, all right, it's been 5 days, let's go back out for a hike. Yeah, of course, I was trying to test out and see, there's a hill. Let's just see if I can actually just sprint up it. I like it, no problem. It was a great feeling. And then the next day I went back to the gym and doing weights and start running. And so it's a good story. I don't necessarily say that always would be the 200 experience for the first or for anybody else, but that happened to be my experience in this particular case. But it was just, I'm very grateful for. But I think also it's just being mindful and being kind, and take time to let your body do its thing to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing some coaching now?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of coaching with San Francisco Marathon. I coached their trail team, so meaning that anybody that I actually run their trail program, but that was before COVID started. That kind of put a kibosh on group settings. And although the San Francisco Marathon is actually happening again this year, so all of that will take time to regroup. I was also coaching a boys or high school cross country team. So that was a lot of fun, chasing people that are way younger and they only have one gear, and like, and they can still, back in the days, right? Like to be able to, like, oh, isn't it nice to be young and just have those fresh legs and lungs that can just go forever, and until you just plop on the other side of the line when you go through.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm 54.
No kidding. Dang. You
I
look
am
about 20 years younger than that. So,
Oh, thanks.
gosh,
Thanks.
you must be doing something right.
It was funny. It was funny. Some of the guys actually had commented, like, when they saw me on day 3 and day 4, like I actually looked younger than I did
Wow.
when I started. Like, some kind of Benjamin Button thing going on. I run back to the time, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know about that. Asian genes. I
There you
can
go.
attribute that to my parents giving me good genes for it. Yeah.
We'll take it. We'll take
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I'll take it.
So with the coaching, are you currently coaching, or are you coaching ultramarathon runners or anything like that, or not really?
I work with runners that primarily now specifically aiming for like the ultra distance, 50 miles and above.
Mm.
So, I throw myself into situations where, I have a friend that she's been trying to finish Rio del Lago on her own. Had a couple of DNFs and really want to go back as a fat ass. So we've been working through that overnight strategy,
Mm.
make sure that worked, and then I crew and pasted her on her 100K attempt on the same course. So
Mm.
we know we got 62 out of 100. So in 2 weeks, in next weekend, we're actually going to be doing the 100 mile,
Oh, nice.
and I anytime when I pace, I always ask for the anchor, the last leg.
Hmm.
I like to be the closer because you get the glory of finishing, but it's also when they're most messed up.
Totally.
Seriously, right? When they're most fatigued and both mentally and physically, and
Hmm.
that's when I feel that I can actually offer and be the most amount of help.
Hmm.
And at least that's the challenging part, and I like the challenge. I like that challenge. And also sharing that, seeing them finish when they struggle, going through that struggle together with them, and then crossing the finish line with them, it makes it that much more special.
That's the good stuff right there.
That's
Yeah.
that's the good stuff. Yeah, it's
Cool.
the struggle. I think it's why we do what we do, right? We
Totally.
we, we keep going back and look for the bigger and harder things. And I always hashtag like do epic shit and don't do
Hmm.
easy. And you don't do easy because anybody can do easy, right?
Yeah.
It's when you do the hard things where things can go wrong. I'm not in any way ashamed of the fact that I actually have gone through a couple of DNFs. I mean,
Hmm.
some days is your day, and sometimes when you do hard things, you DNF because you didn't come prepared, or you
Hmm.
think you're prepared but not enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And inside every DNF, there's a lesson, and
Totally.
it's what you take away from that lesson that defined where you go from there.
Hmm.
And if you can't take that lessons because it's ego or pride or what have you, then you wasted that effort, and you'll take a different path in that sense.
Hmm. Yeah, there's going to be small failures in a big success story,
Yeah,
with all the races that you've done. It's like you can't nail 100% of those. There's no way.
absolutely,
Yeah, you're going to have
absolutely.
some DNFs in there, and yeah, it's just all about how you look at it. It can be a failure, or it can just be a learning lesson. And sounds like you're on the right track there. What's next for you?
So I've got mostly pacing gigs this year. If Western States is a go, I have a runner that I'm going to be crewing and pacing at Western States.
Cool.
He's a good friend of mine, Seth Paul Dalal, and then Bruce. It's Kogodana in May, which will be super fun. I've got Canyons 100K, so I get
Mm.
my Western State qualifier.
Ah.
Although they changed the course this year, so it'll be interesting because mostly uphill. So it's still 15,000 feet. It's kind of funny with like it's still 15,000 feet of vert, right? we say that like there's nothing. It's like 15,000 feet of climbing. It's just I know sometimes when you hear yourself saying it, it's kind of like wait, what's wrong? But it's more of an uphill climb as opposed to it's just a different way. I mean, it's in the old course you climb 9,000 feet, right? 2,500, 9,000 feet, and you come back, and then you go downstream 26,000 feet, and you come back to make
Okay.
100K, right?
Okay.
So this one is just progressively just keep climbing and climbing and climbing, and
Mhm.
the big climb is at the end, the last 20 miles. So
Ah,
yay, something new
sweet.
to it's just different challenge. So I've got that canyons on my docket is canyons 100K and tile 200. So Bruce and I are gonna run tile 200 together. So
Mm.
no pacers here.
Okay.
We're gonna
Ah.
pace each other the entire way. So the crew that took care of me at Jam on Tam 200 will be our crew for tile 200. So they will actually be the backup house, and in that case, I think we have three or maybe potentially four stops where we will see crew, and that's where we actually get our turnover. So we'll rely on the aid station on course a lot more and dirt nap. No luxury of every 8 miles taking a nap and getting nicely pampered. But
Do you guys have a plan for that? Like, I've done that before where I said, okay, we're going to stick together throughout this whole thing. And then it
Sure.
doesn't quite work out that way. Like you try and do it Army Ranger style. We're going to stick together until we
Yeah.
die. But if
Yeah.
different people are going different paces or one person isn't going to make it that day, do you guys have a plan for all that or?
So he and I are actually, fortunately, very, very similar in pace wise.
Mhm.
And he has done Tile Turner a couple of times already. So he's extremely experienced, know the course really well.
Mhm.
And we've trained together. We went up, like, did Whitney twice into 2020 just as a training exercise. So that
Nice.
was huge as far as the climbing and altitude
Yeah.
and getting acclimations and so on and so forth. I mean, when you can level off at like 9,000 feet and your heart rate is not over 100, that tells you that you're comfortable in that
You're
zone,
fit.
right?
Yep.
And then you're still climbing and you're not pushing, you're not redlining. So doing a lot of that training really helped us getting to know each other and getting comfortable, and going through this experience. It's even more. I mean, like there are times that he just, I think that out of the whole 200, there's only one spot that I was like, if at all, a low was this. It was the it was climb number 19. We were coming down the mountain, and it was like just about 5 o'clock, and I just I can feel my energy dipping a little bit, and I stop him and I say, "Hey, dude, I think I'm feeling a little tired." And so he turned around and he said, "Pause," and he gave me a gel, and he gave me some ginger candy, and he said, "Look, we're gonna be light's gonna be out in 15 minutes, and once the light hit, we're good." And then once we got to the trailer, had something to eat, everything was a reset at that point. So, I mean, meaning that he and I have a really good system working together on the trails. And I totally hear what you're saying. And if we need to go separate, split up, we'll figure that out along the way. The crew obviously will have to wait. Fortunately, because the major marker where we expecting to see them has a certain amount of distance. So even if we split up, they can actually still hold and be able to continue. One of the advantage of having and this is having crew twice at these major 200s is with the RV, the crew doesn't have to, because they have a place to sleep and shower.
Mhm.
It saved you a tremendous amount of time as opposed to when I was crewing out of a Sprinter van and we have a hotel room, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So you're constantly catch the runner. They send them off. So now you have technically 3 hours. Really, you don't have 3 hours. You're now driving in reverse back directions to the hotel, take a nap or whatever, feed yourself, take care of whatever you need, preparing for the next time you see them, whatever you need to take care of, and then make sure you constantly are on the GPS to see where they are,
Right.
and then you double jet forward back, and then try to stay ahead of them, and you have to stay ahead. You have to arrive at the aid station at least 45 minutes to an hour and a half earlier than they are. Where's that 3 hour go? You don't
Mhm.
have time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I was up for the 4 days with when I was pacing my friend Brian at Moab. He slept for 6.5 hours in the first 4 days. I slept for 6.5 hours in the first 4 days. So I was up as long as he was. So I totally appreciate having a tool like the RV.
Mhm.
It's a huge advantage to make
Game
the crew's
changer.
life a
Yeah,
lot easier.
for sure.
And we'll have some, being the tech geek, so we'll have some um, infrastructures as far as communication goes to make sure that we can relay our needs to them well in advance or change the situation. Hey, Bruce and I is splitting up, therefore this is plan B. It's now kicking into gear. You guys need to be aware of this time gap between us, kind of thing. From the time he arrived, Mark, and then when I arrive, Mark. So now you know what the delta is, the space between us. But our goal is to try to stick together, and I think that there's some latitude that we can work, we can help each other. When one person is tired, the other person pull, and vice versa. And between our experience of the two, both from crewing and running, I think that's a helpful combination to useful
Oh yeah.
combinations, because now you're sharing. Sometimes like a lot of times we would check each other, right? You know, having two devices and say, wait a minute, that's not the right way, or you know, and just having when you're tired, having two brains to having a second pair of eyes is huge. So
Huge.
I think working together, it's. I mean, in even in a regular 200 race, you probably end up pairing with some runners along the way that are actually similar to your pace.
Hmm.
So why not having somebody that you already know and that actually are at your pace? So that can only add to it than working against. So
Cool. Sounds
yeah,
like a good year, man. It's gonna be fun.
yeah,
Well,
exciting. Looking forward to 2021 is it's coming off this 2020, and it was oddly when I did the last two laps, it was lap 20 and 21, and when I hold the sign to try to take a photo and the guys say 2021.
yeah, yeah.
It was just like, oh wow. And I get to share those last two laps with the crew. So two of them went with me on lap 20, and then the last two went with me on last lap 21 and ran me in. So it was a perfect bookend to
Dude, like what a perfect 200. Like it doesn't sound like you could have asked for a better one. Like
I
everything went damn perfect, man. I mean,
it was I was very grateful and very humbled the fact that everything actually came out
yeah,
the way it did,
yeah.
and couldn't I couldn't ask for a better experience. That's my first, and
Hmm.
I'm very sentimental about first time,
Hmm.
and if at all anything, if I can impart this kind of first experience and share it with someone else who doing their first,
Yeah,
that'll be the ultimate joy for me to be able
that's
to
it.
share
Yes,
it with someone
sir.
else.
That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Any shout outs or anything you want to give? People that helped you along the way, sponsors, anything you got?
Victory Sports Design was there along the way from the very get go. I mean, they have a tough year in 2020, and when we actually pitched the idea that hey, we're going to be doing this crazy thing up down, then yeah, of course now Victor is saying that well now I want to go try it myself, right? So that's awesome. Record is meant to be broken, right? So when
Yeah.
you actually set a record, the goal is like I'm flattered someone else would actually take the challenge. Elevated Lakes was there for us, supplying all the gear, and I've actually I was introduced to them in 2018, and since I start using them, I've been a proponent of there, and I try to spread an advocate for them and spread the work, spread the love, and I don't work for them, and I just basically like loan the boots out and like try it. You try it, and you will know why I say what I say.
Cool. I'm going to check them out.
Yeah, and then the last group it's a last minute add-on. It's a group called Dylan's Wing of Change. It's my buddy in Hockley. Dylan Hockley is his son, 6 years old. In 2012, he was his son Dylan was one of the kids that actually was killed at the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting. And so every year since, they've been actually trying to raise awareness as well as fundraising for uh, better advocacy of gun control.
Mm, mm.
So I was very honored that they asked if I can actually help and dedicate the miles for this particular race to their cost. So every mile that I run, there's a certain amount of dollars that actually get raised towards.
Cool.
There's a organization called Miles for Meaning that will match the miles that we ran
Oh, cool.
in dollars. So of course I was a little. It was through the month of March, so I was a little late because my race started on the 4th, and 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 so the first 4 days I wasn't putting anything up, and then all of a sudden boom, I put up 200 miles, and then people would start following me along during the event, and so they want to do a story to highlight that craziness. Like, how do you do 200 miles? Because most people were clocking in like 5, 6. Like I did my 8 miles today, and so it was fun. It just it wasn't a challenge in that respect. Everybody was contributing to a good cause, but it would just. I came at it a slightly different angle.
They're just wondering who this guy is. Like,
Right.
uh, wow,
So
man.
those three group were very. I'm very honored that they saw the potential and see the craziness and willing to jump on board and be a part of the team. So I thank them for their support.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I love it. It's an awesome story, Michael. I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share it with us. And, it gives me inspiration for my first 2 hundo this year. So I love it, man. I'm sitting here taking notes and, yeah.
Hey, anytime if you want to chat more offline, yeah, happy to talk more. Which 200 are you doing? The Tahoe 200 or?
No, it's called the Sangre de Cristo 200 here in Colorado.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So I think it ends up being like 209 miles or something. It's all in the mountains, of course, so yeah, it's going to be a crazy adventure. And I can't wait, man. So
when's the race?
Not till September. So I got a few months. So
yeah, there you go.
I'll be training hard and, but I'll be keeping an eye on you this year, man. It sounds like you got a big year. So I want to hear more, and you'll have some more stories, and maybe we'll get you back on the podcast to hear more about them. So
Cocodona will be a hoot because we literally, it's a point to point from Black Canyon to Flagstaff, 250 miles, and we just keep leapfrogging. And I'm sure there will be all kinds of crazy stories. Like, you're basically gonna be 4 and 5 days on the road trip. Like, even I'm hauling that rake, there's all kind of, technical terrain that the rake cannot get to, right? And then, other challenges that will come up, but that's the fun of it, right? Is to go into these unknowns and solve the problems, and one thing it's the motto of the Marines, but improvise, adapt, overcome, right? So long as you don't. It was funny when we were coming down on the second last loop. One of my friend Kendall was pacing me, and he goes, "God, I hate this downhill." Like he's been up there quite a few times with me, right? Like the steps just. I said, Kendall, I love you, and I know I share the same sentiment, but I cannot let my brain go there, right? The moment you let that negative thoughts and say this sucks, it's just gonna suck so much more, right? You just gotta have to say, yeah, I don't like it, but I got one more time. The next time I come here, I will never have to look at this again. But then what's funny is that as the week, once I finish and I start seeing people actually doing their jam on TAM, I'm like, hey, can I come? I want to go back, right? It doesn't, it's not the mountain, right? And I made it hard for me, but it's the same mountain that I enjoy and learn to love. It's my church. So I want to go back as much as
totally. I mean, it sounds like it was your church beforehand, but now it's going to be like a holy place for you. Like every time you go there, you're going to have special memories, and it's just going to be a completely different level now.
Here. Yeah. And so that's quite cool. And I updated my Facebook profile photo to one shot that Bruce took for me when on a sunrise. And it was me sitting at just right off the cliff, almost to the top, and it was that kind of captured the sentiment of how I feel about that space.
Nice.
So
nice, yeah. I love it. Michael Lee, this is a great conversation, man. I
Thank
really
you, Adam.
appreciate it. Absolutely. Appreciate it. Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep inspiring people, and can't wait to see what the future holds for you, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
All
Cheers.
right. See you, man.